Welcome to our nominee, Deepika Shukla. Congratulations on your nomination. I'm going to start off reading your nomination letter, dated July 17th, 2024. I am pleased to nominate, dear councilors, I am pleased to nominate Deepika B. For your convenience, sincerely, Laura T. Healy. I'd like to take a minute. I'm going to introduce the councilors who are present. Some more may filter in, and I'll introduce them as they come. With you today.
Sure. So I have my witnesses here, Colleen Pitko, who's a legal administrative specialist at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Attorney David Hoos, who's a defense attorney in Northampton, Massachusetts. My wonderful husband, Dr. Sunny Shukla. My children, David Shukla and Ria Shukla. And we have my former chief, Kevin O'Regan from the U.S. Attorney's Office and a mentor to me as well. Our executive officer from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Christine Sterling. We have Chief Ricciuti here. Our first assistant from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Mary Moraine. And we have our outreach specialist from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Karen Legacy. An intern from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Maya Van Sant. She's also a community activist in Berkshire County. And we have our U.S. Attorney, Josh Levy. And I have people who are like family to me here. My childhood friend, Wilson Osorio, his son, Colton, Mom Maria, and Aunt Vivian, and my mom and my sister and my nephew are on their way up. There's a lot of traffic, but they will be here.
Okay, well, it's wonderful to see all of you here coming out in support. We're going to start by calling up your first witness, David Hoos. So if you can come and join us right next to Deepika, you can stand, you can sit, whatever makes you comfortable.
Good morning, everyone. I am privileged to be here for the third time in my now 44-year legal career. And oddly enough, 2 of the 3 times I've been here were to urge this council to confirm a prosecutor for a judgeship. I say oddly because I have, during my career, been almost exclusively a criminal defense and civil rights litigator. I've dealt with hundreds, if not 1,000 prosecutors during that time in both courts of this state and in the federal courts in Massachusetts and around the Northeast. And I will confess to having more than once expressed my views to the Judicial Nominating Commission, the Joint Bar, or to my governor's counselor, that some of those prosecutors who were nominated to the bench were not appropriate candidates for the bench. But some prosecutors with whom I have interacted over all these years have stood out to me as paragons of intellect and character, and who are not only qualified, but who are preeminently qualified to be judges on the Superior Court. Deepika is such a person. I first met Deepika shortly after she arrived in Springfield and joined the U.S. Attorney's Office, and was paired in what now seems like a coincidence with another assistant U.S. attorney who has successfully made the jump from federal prosecutor to the Superior Court. Not long thereafter, she was assigned to prosecute a high-profile client of mine charged with terrorism offenses. Both of those cases were complex, and they required someone with the gravitas to handle the complex issues involving unusual defendants in both cases and somewhat esoteric legal issues in both cases in a fair and impartial manner. Later, she was selected to be the attorney in charge of the Western Division, and I had occasion to appeal to her supervisory judgment on more than one occasion. What I had learned about Deepika at that time was that her door was always open. When I talk with young lawyers, I often ask them, what does your client want more than anything else? The answer that I'm looking for is to be heard. They want to be heard. It's great to have a candidate who is intellectually gifted, as Deepika surely is, but her greatest quality is that she listens. She has always heard me. She has always cared about my clients. And isn't being a good listener the essence of what a Superior Court judge should be? I have no doubt that as a Superior Court judge, everyone who appears before her will be heard, and more importantly, will feel that they have been heard. Now, this trait is largely ingrained in her character, but it certainly did not hurt that she was a social worker and a civil rights litigator before going to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Oftentimes, when federal prosecutors are nominated to the state bench, I hear criticisms of their qualifications that I find to be really meritless. One that I hear is, well, they don't have any experience in the state system. Well, my response to that is the state practice, it's not rocket science. And if you are well-educated, intelligent, and have a good understanding of the law writ large, as Deepika does, the adjustment to state practice is not difficult. The other thing I hear is, well, federal courts don't have very many trials, and therefore the assistant U.S. attorneys don't get the kind of trial experience that state court assistant DAs get. Well, fair enough to a point. There are certainly fewer trials in the federal court. But what is also true is that those that do go to trial are much more complex and demanding than in state court cases. And in my judgment, preparing a prosecution memo on a big case, presenting it to the grand jury, seeing it through trial, or even up to a plea on the eve of trial, is, in my judgment, a far greater qualification than a state court prosecutor who may have tried more cases, but the bulk of them being drug cases, assault cases, in which that individual probably picked up some bad habits along the way. Frankly, Deepika has enough trial experience, and I can tell you as a representative and former Western Mass representative of this CJA panel, that she is a respected opponent at trial by the criminal defense bar. And I also note in respect to her candidacy that the last 3 judges that were appointed in our part of the state had only one type of experience, either civil or criminal. Deepika has experience in both civil and criminal litigation, and I think that that fact makes her an outstanding candidate. When it comes time for sentencing, Deepika has advocated for lengthy sentences, but she has also modified her position after listening to mitigating evidence presented by defense counsel. And there's that word again. She listens. You have the opportunity to confirm an intellectually gifted immigrant, a multilingual, multicultural person of color, and a person who has demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to the Western Mass community by her involvement in multiple organizations, to a post that sorely needs more just like her. I recommend her without reservation and urge you to confirm her without delay.
Thank you so much for those comments. Does anyone, Councilor Devani has any questions?
That was very heartfelt and thoughtful, and your testimony means a lot. And the thing that came through was that she listens and that she's willing to change her opinion when given more evidence. That means a lot to me. And I like that she's had both civil and criminal. I sort of like more criminal with people that come before us. But you know, she was attorney in charge. So tell us her responsibility and what you saw. Just name one or two things that you saw that she did that you thought was really outstanding.
Well, I think that in Springfield, of course, that the U.S. Attorney, and Mr. Levy could speak to this far better than me. There's a hierarchy within the office. The Springfield office of the U.S. Attorney's Office is small. It's always been fairly small, 6 or 7 lawyers. And over the years, there has been someone in charge of that office. Mr. O'Regan, who was here, had that post for a number of years. And they are essentially the supervisory attorney for the 6 or 7 that work out of the Springfield courthouse. So what my interactions with Deepika were, I can, without thinking too hard about it, I can think of a couple of occasions where essentially I had kind of gone as far as I could with the line prosecutor that I was dealing with. And I don't really like to go over anybody's head, but sometimes you have to, because I know that they don't have the authority to do what I'm asking them to do. So, yeah. So I always tell the line prosecutor, look, do you mind if I go over your head? And on one I'm thinking of in particular, I went over his head and I spoke to Deepika. She was, as always, cordial, pleasant, listened, and actually was helpful, but I ended up going over her head too. So it's a part of the process. And I had another incident that I won't belabor. It was with an out-of-town prosecutor, something that happened at a trial that shouldn't have happened. And I can tell you that the first thing my partner and I, who were trying the case with, thought of is we need to talk to Deepika because we knew she would listen. She knew she would hear us out. And we knew that she would take the appropriate action. So in that position, did she instruct the people under her, or did she advise, or what did you say? I wouldn't necessarily know that. Yeah. I think that's a question for. Sure. No, I was just saying, I just was saying for you, looking in what you saw, you know, and her that position of authority. Yeah, no, I think to a certain extent you set a tone by your leadership. But again, the U.S. Attorney's Office is a big office. I don't know how many lawyers Josh has over there now, but we have this very small slice out there in Springfield. And I think Deepika, in her position of leadership, she sets the tone for the office. Right. Well, you not only you being a great witness, but you're very informative, because I have to say, in my 25 years, this is a very different her responsibilities and her background is very different than what I see before me. And so it was a learning process, and I learned for the hours that we met and vetting and with you. And I thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Does anyone else have questions for this witness?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. It means a lot.
Oh, that's okay. I don't mind standing up. I'll be sitting all the way back.
We have some more chairs we can bring in from out there as well. So before I move on, I just want to acknowledge we've been joined by Counselor Ianella. So thank you for joining us this morning, Counselor.
Good morning. I was talking to some constituents, so.
And I also just want to acknowledge, I believe Counselor Kennedy is on the Zoom watching and may want to participate.
I am, Madam Chairwoman.
Oh,
I
there's that point.
regret that I can't be there in person, but
Oh, he's talking. Unmute Terry if you wanted to say something.
Is this Zoom?
Yeah.
could you hear me?
Terry, did you want to?
I just wanted to say I
Something.
apologize for not being in there in person.
No, I think he's driving.
I had a long
Okay.
planned vacation prior to these nominations, but I will be attending and listening by Zoom and asking the nominee appropriate questions.
Okay, we'll turn it to you when it's your turn.
Thank
All
you.
right, with that, I would like to invite up your second witness, Pauline Pico. Did I say that correctly? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the members of the Governor's Council for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Assistant United States Attorney Deepika Shukla. It is an honor to do so. My name is Pauline Pitko, and I am a legal administrative specialist with the United States Attorney's Office in Springfield, Massachusetts. I have known and worked with Deepika for 10 years, from her role as a line AUSA to her current position as the chief of the Springfield branch office. Through those 10 years, I have experienced and witnessed how Deepika consistently treats all people that she interacts with respect and dignity. She has a kind and thoughtful manner. Through Deepika's leadership as chief of the office, she helped me realize my potential by encouraging me to take on more responsibilities and providing me with her time, talent, and insightful advice. She is selfless, always having one's best interest in mind and working toward the greater good of everyone. Deepika believed in me before I believed in myself. She trusted and had the confidence in me to put the grand jury in my care. Deepika is a leader who demonstrates integrity with her unwavering support, knowledge, and fairness. I feel comfortable going to Deepika with any concerns or questions, knowing that I will always be welcomed and that I will receive the guidance that is required. Deepika is someone that I trust to go to in any situation. Deepika and I have bonded over our love of crochet. She continually inspires me with her work. Each item is impeccably made, from household items, wearables, and accessories to her love of amigurumi. Deepika has created iconic figures such as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Gandhi, and the late musician Prince, to name a few. She is a crochet artist. Her work is remarkable and an inspiration to me to keep improving myself. Again, Deepika is leading by example. Her influence has enhanced my life personally and professionally. It is important for me to let you know the positive impact that Deepika has on my life. Her qualities will inspire and benefit all people that will have the privilege to know her. I will forever hear Deepika's voice of encouragement. You can do it, Pauline, with any task that comes my way. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Counselor Devani?
That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks from your hat.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't want her to leave.
No, but I'm very happy.
I have to say, I think there's few people in the world that can point to one person who influenced their lives as you have talked about her. I mean, to give you confidence before you've had it.
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic. So can you think of one direction that she gave you and how it influenced that particular case?
Yes, ma'am. Her leadership with the grand jury has encouraged me to try new responsibilities so that I could grow professionally and try new skills. And having that role as a grand jury coordinator has enhanced my life personally and professionally.
So how many years did you work under her?
10 years.
Wow.
I've known her for 10 years.
So you really know. So how often would you meet?
We interact daily if we're both into the office,
Daily?
whether it's just daily camaraderie. But we have monthly check-ins for different things that come up with grand jury. I deal with a lot of different
So
and she guides me.
because so when you think of her personality, you've seen her when she's stressed, you've seen her when she's, really has so much before her to do. And what kind of composure does she have?
Very calm demeanor. Very calm, very kind. And I wouldn't know she's stressed
Wow.
because she just gives her direction and her leadership and thoughtfulness when she guides me and when I've seen her guide others.
Oh, that's great.
You know?
Well, I tell you, your testimony means an awful lot to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. No other questions? Okay, thank you. Before we move on to your statement, is there anyone here in opposition of this candidate? Anyone else here want to say something in support? Okay, so hearing none, seeing none, I turn to you for your statement to council.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Governor's Council. Thank you for taking the time today and in advance of this hearing to evaluate my candidacy for the Superior Court. It is clear to me that you all take very seriously your role in selecting those who will administer justice in the Commonwealth's courts. Thank you. I am so grateful to Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for my nomination. I am beyond honored. Thank you to Chief Legal Counsel Paige Scott Reed and Deputy Legal Counsel Derek Kesselheim and their staff, and to Valerie McCarthy for their guidance and assistance. I'm grateful to the Judicial Nominating Commission for the countless hours they volunteer to ensure that well-qualified judges serve in our courts. Thank you to my wonderful witnesses for traveling to Boston today and for offering your testimony. I would not be here today without the support of my family, including my mom, who's here today, and my two other parents, my grandparents, passed a few years ago at the ages of 100 and 93. I'm so lucky to have my amazing husband, Sonny, who is my biggest cheerleader and who has dedicated his career as an emergency room physician to helping all those in need of care. He is a super doc, super husband, and super dad, who are three amazing children, two of whom are here today and who I introduced. David, our hockey goalie, Ria, our acrobatic dancer, and the baby of our family, Myra, who is 3 and is the boss of all of us. I want you all to know how honored I am to be here before you. And honestly, what a huge deal this is for me and for my family. When Governor Healy told me that she would be nominating me to serve the Commonwealth as an Associate Justice of the Superior Court, I blurted out, "You made my year." I immediately felt foolish, but really it was an understatement. Because growing up, I could never have imagined to be sitting here with you all today. All my life, I have felt a deep sense of duty to try my best to make the world a better place. And for that, I credit my incredible mom. She has lived her life with extreme selflessness and has ensured that her children had a safe and loving upbringing. As a young woman, my mom moved across the world from India to Canada for the same reason so many other immigrants do: to provide a better life for her family. But soon after, she found herself a single mother in her 20s with 3 very small children. She was fortunate to have her education and training as a physician, but not so fortunate to avoid the roadblocks of discrimination and racism in her field. So she took the first job she could get. A remote city in the tundra of Alberta needed a pediatrician. And that's where we all went. To me, my mom was just mommy, but she was so much more to everyone else in our community. I remember being with her in the grocery store and people coming up to her and saying, "Thank you so much for saving my baby's life." I saw how much she impacted other people's lives and how she approached them with kindness and humility, and I wanted to do the same. My grandparents soon arrived from India to help my mom raise my twin brother, older sister, and me, and they stayed with us almost my entire life until they both passed a few years ago. I was so lucky to have 3 parents in my life and to be surrounded by love. When I was 10, we moved here to Massachusetts, to Chelmsford. I witnessed my mom's and my grandparents' daily sacrifices for my siblings and me. I saw them face the difficulties of being immigrants of color in America. But I also saw how honored they were to be in this wonderful country that gave us so much. I remember my grandfather beaming with joy at the age of 89 when he cast his first vote in an American presidential election shortly after becoming a United States citizen. When I was in college, I was also naturalized as a US citizen. I stood in a room of over 1,000 immigrants from all over the world, my heart swelling with pride. It was one of the best days of my life. 5 days after that magnificent day was September 11th, 2001. And I joined in the collective horror and heartbreak of all Americans as I saw the planes hit the towers. And soon thereafter, I started to witness family and friends and people who looked like us become targets of hate speech and sometimes violence. I was inaugurated into becoming an American by experiencing the best and the worst of it all at once. Since then, I have developed a complicated identity as an American, seeing both its beauty and its bruises. These experiences led me into a career of public service and in the public interest. First as a community organizer, then as a civil rights lawyer, and then in representing the United States. I wanted to give back to the community that embraced me. And I wanted to ensure justice was available to all, even those who are so often overlooked. It is this same sense of justice that led me to aspire to be a judge, which I view as the ultimate legal public service job. Esteemed members of the Governor's Council, as I sit here before you, I am reminded of the immense sense of pride I felt in September 2001 when I was so honored to officially be called an American. If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed by all of you, I will bring the same sense of pride, duty, and responsibility to my work on the Superior Court. Thank you again for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So our practice is to start from the right of where I normally would sit. So I will turn it first to Councilor Devine. Councilor, questions you have.
Nice to see you again. That was perfect. We have the whole picture because I'm voting for the whole person, not just someone on the paper. But I want to thank you for all the time that you afforded me, and you had to come away to see me, and I really appreciate that. So you're on the Hall of Fame for the Belgian author, Justice Gans, God rest his soul, Justice Hines, and Justice Island, and all of them. But no, I'm very impressed with you, and I have to mention your mother. Pediatrician, imagine a pediatrician, God bless you. So your family are givers, you know, and I'm first generation. My parents were Italian immigrants. They came separately as children, and we talked about that. In your nationality and mine faced a lot of discrimination, but you know what? We both said my mom and dad were the most patriotic, and you said yours was too. So that aside, so you know, you've had a lot of positions. What position would you say it makes you more qualified to be on the bench?
It's hard to pick just one, so I'm gonna answer all of them together because I think that really is the true answer here. I started out as a civil litigator at a big firm. I spent about half of my time doing pro bono work because that's what I was passionate about, and I felt it was the duty of firms with resources to give back. Then I went to a small firm and then a nonprofit and did plaintiff civil rights work. Then when I got to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had only civil experience, so I was inaugurated into criminal work very quickly, and that has been so rewarding over the last 10 years. Work on very important cases, to speak with victims, to also see the defense side, and to see how these cases affect people's lives so in such a significant way.
So you've had hundreds of cases, which I love, that you come with that experience. So is there one that'll always be there for you that was the most challenging?
Yes, so I'll say emotionally challenging. So there was a case I worked on a few years ago where I represented the United States in a criminal prosecution against a man who had taken his estranged wife from her home, kidnapped her, taken her, and she was rescued from Tennessee. She was a recent immigrant from India. She had a small child and she didn't know where she was. Most of us can see the signs and say, okay, I'm in Tennessee and I was in this other state before, but because she was here so recently and she just went to work and went back home, it was especially scary for her. That case really resonated with me because I saw in her a lot of similarity culturally, obviously, and it was very meaningful for me to be able to be there for her. As someone, she looked at me and trusted me, but that I understood her experience and her background.
So you have to love to write to go to the Superior Court. And meeting you, I found that out. So you did give us a sample that is asked of you. So why don't you tell us about that particular case?
Sure, that was a string of armed robberies. It was a criminal case, a prosecution of a defendant who had robbed 9 different convenience stores across Western Mass in the period of about 3 weeks. So it was a very scary crime for the victims. And it was a opposition to a motion to suppress. So there were various things being challenged in that motion: the search of the home, the search of the phone, and what was on, and a subsequent search of the phone. So there were a lot of sort of intricate legal things to tackle there. So I wrote that, and then we did an oral argument, and then in the end, the defendant ended up pleading guilty and he was sentenced to life.
I'm especially concerned about disabilities. I served 22 years on the Commission on Disabilities. So tell us what experience you've had with people with disabilities.
Sure, I've had some litigation experience and also some experience in community involvement. So I'll start with my litigation experience. I represented, when I was at the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, I represented plaintiffs, indigent plaintiffs in housing discrimination cases. One of my cases was I represented a class of senior disabled plaintiffs against the housing authority in the town that they lived in. They lived in town housing. They were all disabled, and so there was certain housing designated for them. And they were required by the housing authority to do certain things extra that other residents were not. So we sued the housing authority on behalf of the plaintiffs for discrimination based on the Fair Housing Act and also the Americans with Disability Act. That ended up settling. Personally, I also serve on the board of the Behavioral Health Network, which is an organization in Western Massachusetts that serves people with, gives them treatment for mental health and substance use issues. So I've encountered people with disabilities in my work there as well.
That's very important to me because I feel a lot of judges don't understand, and you had the experience. So, you're going to the Superior Court and you've been there many times. So you see you see the weaknesses and the strengths of that court. Tell me what things you would like to change.
So I'm actually practicing in federal court right now. I have had the opportunity to observe in Superior Court and practice with opposite a lot of defense attorneys who practice in Superior Court as well. I think that there's always room to grow and learn. I really admire the judges of the Superior Court, the way that they conduct themselves and really take the time to evaluate every case before them. I think that work needs to be done and is being done, but it can always be done on addressing our biases personally and how they affect the work. And I know that has been something that has kind of gained a little more popularity among the larger population where other people have been focusing on it for a long time.
So, okay, so is there any way that you're preparing to go to
Yes.
take this position? Could you tell us?
Yes, I understand there will be a learning curve here. So I have started to study already. I'm reading the rules that are and noting where they're different from the federal rules, where they're the same, the civil rules, the criminal rules, and also some of the laws that are a little bit different than federal laws and the procedures for bail hearings, for example. So I'm doing some of my own studying. I've also gone to Superior Court to observe. I've observed the first session. I've observed some trials, and I'm also speaking to the people I know who work there to talk about their experiences.
Now, most people don't know the difference between federal and the Superior Court you're going to. So, why don't you tell us the difference and how you balance that?
Sure. So in federal court, all of the matters there are also civil and criminal matters, just like in the Superior Court. But the claims in civil suits and the charges in criminal suits are all based on federal statutes. So the laws that the claims are based on are different. However, a lot of those laws have analogous laws in the state. So there's also a lot of similarities.
Well, I have to say, age is important to me and life experience. But your experience really is amazing with your age and for the years you have been an attorney. And your witnesses were excellent. And we look to hear from the witnesses because they know firsthand, what you've done. And not only that, but your demeanor. And I look for compassion, and I saw that in you when we first met and in all your history and what you've done for people pro bono. And we don't see that in a lot of people that come before us that they had pro bono work. And I appreciate that. But, there really isn't any other questions I've asked. I just want to bring some of the questions that we talked about to the public, and I couldn't be more pleased. And I think it's important, not only your qualifications, your experience, your background, but also we need diversity. And I have been, telling you that since I came here 25 years, and we're doing a lot better. I'm very happy. So I congratulate you for applying. And so this was the first time, right? And so I thank you for that, and I thank the governor too. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for all your time. That was a long way to come.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Counselor. I'd like to turn it over to Counselor Ianella for any
Morning,
questions.
how are
Good
you?
morning. How are you?
Go ahead. What is your position on minimum mandatory sentencing?
I think that it's important that judges have discretion in sentencing. And mandatory minimum sentence definitely curb that discretion. So it's very important to look at all of the factors that come before you in sentencing, including the defendant's circumstances. So I think that while they can serve a purpose to ensure a serious sentence for serious crimes, it's important to allow judges to have discretion.
I understand that, but if you had to choose, it was a ballot question, I know I'm being facetious. Would you rather have minimum mandatory, or you would not?
I think
Those are the two options.
it's tough in sort of such general terms, but again, I would favor.
Let me ask this, you can always have minimum mandatory, right? So,
Yeah, I think that judge's discretion is important, so if I had to choose yes or no, I would say, no, I would favor no mandatory.
yeah, I agree. So I can, what about? Let me take my concern. I have always said on this council, this is nothing new. Once a prosecutor, always a prosecutor. I say that all the time. You know, and I think if I ask 10 people outside and they all have a criminal case. I said, you got, oh, what's going on? Oh, I got arrested for this, that. And who's the judge? What, do you think most of them would rather go in front of a prosecutor or someone who's a sole practitioner? And I know you're gonna say, well, it depends, what's the record of the prosecutor, is he feared, but generally speaking, I'll answer the question first. I think 10 out of 10 would say they'd rather not go in front of the prosecutor. Your thoughts?
As a criminal defendant?
Yes.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think if I were a criminal defendant, I would feel the same way. But I think as people who have experience in prosecution or defense, as they take the bench, they show, they take the bench and they should be impartial. And I believe that 9.9 times out of 10, they are. It's a different role. Those prior experiences definitely inform their position on the bench. But I think that's why I think it's important for judges to really assess their biases in every case that comes before them.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I would say the majority can put their biases aside. Not 99%, it's just not happening. Same thing, I'm a personal injury lawyer. Would I rather go in front of you and try a personal injury case in front of you, or in front of a personal injury lawyer who's now a judge, without question, the personal injury? We all try to be fair, yes, you're favor one side, that's just life. Back to the sentence, well, on the council, I've always, whether it's the parole board or whether it's the state court system, when it comes to sentencing, if possible, I've always been a strong believer in rehabilitation as opposed to incarceration. When it comes to the parole board, I don't like prosecutors on the parole board because they like to retry the case. That's not their job. I like social science people on the parole board because they know about addiction. They know about mental health issues. And so many people who are sentenced, whether the district court or the superior court, whatever the crime is, it goes back to a mental health or an addiction problem. You know, they may rob a store. Well, that's not a drug charge per se, but maybe because they're on drugs. So give me your sense of what do you do on those situations? You know someone has a drug problem. You just send them to jail and he or she gets out and here we go again. They're back in. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree with you that rehabilitation is an extremely important aspect of sentencing. And I've seen in my roles, like I said, on the board of the Behavioral Health Network, I've seen issues of substance use and how they affect people's lives and how they often intersect with the criminal justice system. I think our goal as judges and society is to make the world a better place. So people are going to be re-entering the world, even if they get a prison. And it's our job to make sure that they're the best person they can be and Part of that is treatment and rehabilitation and addressing their issues with addiction.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. You have the whole family. It's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. At this point, I want to turn it to Counselor Kennedy on Zoom if he is ready. We're unmuting.
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get on.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Time.
Once again, I apologize for not being there in person, with a pre-planned vacation. I do have a couple of questions, and, we talked on the phone, and I asked you these questions on the phone. My first question is very simple. How many cases have you tried in the Superior Court?
I haven't tried any cases in Superior Court.
Okay, and how many times have you been in the Superior Court acting as a lawyer?
None.
Okay, now I asked you this question on the phone. You gave a pretty good answer. Why should we appoint somebody to the bench that has never been in the Superior Court as a practicing lawyer, as opposed to someone from Western Massachusetts who's spent their whole career practicing there and knows the court inside out?
Sure. Thank you for asking this question. I think it's a very important question and I welcome the opportunity to answer it. It's a very valid concern. If I were sitting where you are, I would also have that concern. I can tell you that what I will bring to the Superior Court is varied experience. I have a good balance of civil work, both defensive civil and plaintiff civil work. And I also have 10 years experience in criminal law. I also have, as I told Counselor Devaney, started studying for this, and I intend to spend extra hours, after hours, getting up to speed. I have no problem with doing that. And also, I am a fast learner. When I came to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had no criminal experience at all. I didn't even know what a plea was or a plea hearing. And I was able to jump in and learn the job and within 5 years become the chief of the office.
Okay, when you say you have 10 years of criminal experience, you're talking about in the federal courts, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you would agree with me the way the federal courts function and the way the Massachusetts state courts function are very different.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so when you talk about 10 years worth of criminal experience, it's in a very different forum than the forum that we have in the state courts. Agreed?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, and you might be a real fast learner, but why do we have to teach somebody on the job, right? Once again, my question is, why are we putting somebody there who already knows that job?
Sure. Well, like I said, I do not want to add any more burden onto the court. So I am willing and able to spend extra hours to do the studying on my own time, and so that I can be up to speed, to observe other judges, and to take the time, if I'm so lucky to be confirmed, to take this time in between when I would begin to spend that time in the courts and learning as much as I can.
Okay, next question. And all of these questions I asked you before, out of fairness, and did a pretty good job with them. Sentencing. Do you would agree with me that the federal sentencing guidelines tend to be more harsh than what Massachusetts would impose?
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, do you think they're too harsh? The federal sentencing guidelines? I know they're not mandatory anymore.
I think in many situations they are a lot higher than what the crime and the person in front of me deserves. And in reality, the sentences that we see, at least in Western Massachusetts, are most often below the guidelines, which would reflect that they are too strict.
Okay. Now, my friend Counsel Inella touched on mandatory sentencing. You agree with me that prosecutors have a lot of power when it comes to mandatory sentencing because they're the charging authority, whether it's the U.S. Attorney's Office or the state Attorney General's office?
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Okay. Do you think in the federal system that some prosecutors have a tendency to charge with an eye towards getting a better deal later on? In other words, they charge somebody with a heavy mandatory sentence, knowing that they're going to be able to plea it down with something that might be a little oppressive.
I can speak to my experience at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the way that I try and lead by example within the Springfield branch office. I do not think that we use mandatory minimums to coerce defendants later on. It's our job at the beginning of a case to evaluate the case and to determine what's fair and to charge it in an appropriate way.
Okay, in Western Massachusetts, how about in Eastern Massachusetts? Do you think that happens?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues, but from working with them, I believe they share the same values.
Okay. One of the things that I have found, and I've spent a lot of time in my 40-year career in the Superior Court doing both civil and criminal cases, as I have. Federal prosecutors, when they come in with no experience into the Superior Court, and that's where you stand, tend to try to run it like it's a federal court, and it doesn't work. And by that, I mean, they come in being really strict on deadlines. They come in giving harsher sentences than somebody who came through the state system. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's very important to enter the job with humility, which is how I try to enter any new situation, and realize that I don't know a lot here and I have a lot to learn. So I think that is how I would approach my job as a Superior Court judge if I were so honored to be confirmed. My perspective is I want to learn from others. I want to see what other people think of things and able to inform my decisions. But in the end of the day, it's my judgment that takes priority. However, I like to learn from others and get other perspectives.
Sure. But my experience, and I'm talking about 40 years worth of experiences, when people come out of the federal system into the Superior Court, they tend to be a lot harsher on sentencing. And a part of it is from where they came from, because as you indicated earlier, the sentencing guidelines tend to be a lot more harsher than Massachusetts would impose. But they come in from that background, and sure, they think, oh, this is a fair sentence, giving an 8 to 10, where a judge who came through this system might be talking about a 3 to 5. Right?
Right. Yeah, and I agree that we look at the sentences that we've had experience with, and that may influence how we look at the crimes in the state court, which is why I think it is so important to consult with other people, to observe others' courts, and to talk with other judges about how they approach sentencing, and also most importantly to look at the case, all of the factors in the case, including the factors related to the defendant. Okay,
I'm going to wrap up because I'm going to be divorced if I don't go back to my family on my vacation. We had a long talk on the phone, and you certainly addressed a lot of my concerns when we spoke. And your counselor has been very supportive of you. She said, indicates you have an incredible amount of support in Western Massachusetts, which is where you're going to be. So that's important. And she's been a big fan of yours. So as I indicated, you had me 99.9% there during our phone conversation. That hasn't changed. I'm still 99.9% there. So I look forward to the vote next week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. I now turn it over to Councilor DePaulo.
Thank you, Councilor Jacobs. Good morning.
Good morning.
First off, Councilor Jacobs has been a huge advocate of yours for a while, from well before I saw your information come down. And I thank Councilor Kennedy for addressing some questions that I had. You did a good job addressing them. I want to talk about a couple other things that you alluded to in your application and that'll be relevant to you in Superior Court. So you referenced the Harvard study on racial disparities in criminal sentencing. And you noted that wrote the consequences of racial disparities in Superior Court are potentially most devastating. And you referenced the fact that obviously the crimes in Superior Court potentially carry a harsher sentence than in district court. And, you know, we know from that report, as again, you know, that that's where the disparities happen. But actually, when we look at the data in that report, the disparities are in Superior Court, and they're overwhelmingly on drug and firearms cases. And you worked with firearms cases on the federal level,
Yes.
correct? Why do you think there is in fact a racial disparity? And we know the data in the Gantt study is older than we'd like, and we know there's been efforts to address it. Do you think that those disparities, because on guns charges, it's something like 182 days, where a Black or Latino defendant is gonna get that much longer time in our institutions than a similarly situated white defendant, accounting for criminal background, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think it's a racial issue that caused that disparity, or is there something else at play?
Do I think it's a racial issue?
Do you think those disparities occur? Why do you think those disparities occur?
Okay, yes, so thank you for bringing this up. I think this is a really, really important issue for all Superior Court judges to think about. The disparities in that study were very concerning, and I know they are to you as well. And they indicate that it is a racial issue, that there are, the disparities are based on race, that people of color, particularly Black and Latinx defendants, are sentenced much more harshly than their white counterparts. Now, do I think judges are intentionally, oh, I have a Black defendant in front of me, I want to sentence them more harshly? I think most likely that's not happening. But we all have biases. If you are human, you have a bias. So I think it's important for judges to constantly be checking those biases.
Why do you think it happens in the firearms cases, or has happened?
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. However, firearms cases are, firearms cause a lot of damage, right, to people, and people have strong feelings about
I don't know Springfield very well or the surrounding communities, but I do know Worcester has gang issues, and a lot of the firearms stem from that. And I've worked with youth who faced firearms charges. And in some rare cases, I guess I'll say, but I think it's not really that rare. Kids who aren't gang involved end up with a firearm because their safety is at risk in school, wherever they are. And I've seen really harsh sentences come down on kids or young adults, emerging adults, who aren't involved in the criminality of the gang. They claim that they're carrying it in self-defense. There's really no way, I suppose, to prove that. Do you think that that kind of situation would warrant a more lenient sentence than someone who is involved or demonstrably involved in criminal activity?
I think that it's very important at sentencing to address all of the factors here, and the factors related to the defendant are very, very important to address. So if I were to sit on the Superior Court, if you were to confirm me, I would want to know as much about the defendant as possible. And if they have no ties to any violence and they're carrying a firearm for protection, it's a different situation than if it's somebody who may be involved in violence or who used that firearm in a violent crime. So it's definitely something that.
Do you think that that defendant might be treated differently than a defendant in a rural community who has a firearm illegally? Because of how they present in court?
I think it's possible, depending on the situation. I would try to, again, look at all of the factors here and look at the defendant as a person, including how they grew up. And one thing that we have in the federal court with sentencing is we have a lot more information about the defendant before us, which is something that frankly, I worry about a little bit, because I do want to know as much as I can about the person in front of me.
How can you pull that off? in a business way. And we're
I,
really backed up right now, right? And we're gonna be catching up, but we're really backed up. How are you gonna do that for every defendant?
I understand that resources is a real issue and that the state courts don't have the luxury of the federal court of time and resources. But I think that I don't want to ever lose sight, if I am to become a Superior Court judge, that there's a human being in front of me. And that this is possibly the worst day of their lives. And so if I can do whatever I can to spend that extra time to ask for sentencing memos in especially serious cases, so that I can have the best picture I can with the resources I have.
Do you think it would be valuable to track your sentencing over the years
Yeah.
relative to defendants and their profiles?
I think so. I think the more information you have,
Yeah.
the better.
Counselor Kennedy talked for a little bit about the federal sentencing guidelines, which I'm not familiar with at all, but I am familiar with the Superior Court sentencing guidelines, which are non-binding.
Yes.
But I'm especially interested in those on the mitigating and the aggregating circumstances that the commission came up with. And you've been talking a lot about the individual circumstances of the case. So when it comes to age, what do you know about brain science as it intersects with our Massachusetts courts?
I know about the recent decision in the Mattis case and how the Supreme Judicial Court found that a sentence of life without parole for emerging adults, so not juveniles, but adults who are 18 to 20, that is unconstitutional. And I know that has had effects on many sentences that people are now up for parole because they were sentenced for crimes during that age. And I know that case was based on expert testimony, in part on the brain science. I also am very interested in it. I cannot say I'm an expert in it, but I think it's a very relevant issue. The National Association of Women Judges had a CLE a few months ago on this issue.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to know more about it. So I watched that and I found that very interesting. I think it's a tool that's important for judges to consider.
I heard that was a good program.
It was.
And it was a Superior Court judge who conducted the findings of fact that the SJC relied on in Mattis. And one of the things that the findings of fact and the Mattis decision indicated was that the decision was up to age 20 because that's where the expert testimony stopped. But that there was evidence within the expert testimony that would speak to the brain science telling us that it's really 25, it's not 20, where the break is. What happens when the 24-year-old comes before you and the defense attorney in sentencing offers that argument?
Age is definitely a factor to consider at sentencing.
But will you be brave enough to say, yes, we're not doing life without parole in spite of what the statute tells me because the brain science is indicating that this person is similarly situated to a 19-year-old?
I think, again, age is a very important factor to consider among many others. If a statute is saying I have to do something as a judge, I have to follow the law. That's what I would.
Well, wouldn't you follow the SJC? I mean, if the evidence indicates that expands the expert testimony that the SJC already acknowledged is valid, I mean, wouldn't that indicate that we must follow the SJC and find accordingly that a 24-year-old should not get life without parole? If that evidence was presented.
I understand that the SJC decision applies to people from ages 18 to 20, and that is the binding law there, and otherwise the statute is binding in certain cases. I think it's important to consider, and I would definitely be open to if expert testimony was presented to me or if some argument was put forward, I would definitely evaluate that and listen to the evidence and incorporate it into whatever sentence I would give if I were to serve on Superior Court.
Okay. Do I have any time, Counselor? On the issue of bias, a case that happened in Superior Court recently that troubled me was a high school student. And this is a pretty common situation because our school districts have limited resources and we have increasingly profound mental health challenges in our youth. So there's often dispute about what the responsibility of the school district is to send a student to a alternative program or outplacement for their education. So in this particular case, a young lady presented with some severe mental health challenges, including, I believe, being on the spectrum. And the family was requesting that she be returned to the alternative school where she was. The district didn't want to pay for it. And the judge ordered the student back to school. And within 2 days, there was an incident where the student had to be removed from school that traumatized, no doubt, that child, but the family, all the children in the school who witnessed what happened. Do you think there was a bias at play there? Because the experts, as I understand, or at least the attorney, were presenting the evidence that this child was unable to function in the traditional high school setting.
I can't speak to what was happening in that particular case, obviously. I only have the facts that you've presented here. However, it does bring up an important issue in that it's important to think about the consequences to the litigants of the decisions that are made in the Superior Court. So not only, you know, what are the facts in front of me and we're in this tiny little box here. There's something that's going to happen as a result of the decision, and thinking about, is that the right thing that's going to happen?
But of course, we could take differing views, right? We could say it's best for the child to be in school right away, to be in that public setting. We could say it's best for the child to be in this very specialized alternative setting. I mean, there's obviously alternative viewpoints since we're in litigation, right?
Sure.
I fear that sometimes those of us, I fear that sometimes those of us who haven't lived certain experiences come in with biases around what's the best interest of the child, or what's the best interest of, in this particular case, a child's education. And I just feel we mostly talk often about racial biases, which are also incredibly important.
Sure.
Counselor, I have no further questions. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. We talked at great length multiple times. And so I don't have any questions for you at this point, but I do want to just reflect back to council, to whom much of this has already been shared. But you do have overwhelming support that I've been receiving in the form of phone calls and emails. The emails have been forwarded to council, and we held a hearing on Monday in Springfield, where just a really similar to the emails, a diverse set of supporters have come forward to endorse with enthusiasm your nomination. So community advocates who run various organizations, public defenders who hilariously, against their own typical standing, just had such wonderful things to say about you, your fellow members of your staff, both that you supervise and who had formerly supervised you, and judges, just to name a few. And so, what I just wanted to reflect back that I personally appreciated hearing was the consistency with which they describe you as someone who is kind and compassionate and thoughtful and a listener, and willing to not just listen, but adjust your standpoint. I really appreciated hearing from the public defense side that you were reflected back as someone who is fair and concerned with victims, but also defendants and the community at large, and factor in all of those things. And I also really appreciated hearing after the hearing was done from so many people, including long-standing friends and family members, that they had for the first time ever heard things about your accomplishments that they had never heard before. And almost everyone who attended learned something new about you, which I think sort of underscores the humility that people talked about, but it was humility in action that came through that hearing experience. All of that to say, I will be very honored and will enthusiastically make a motion to confirm you at our next assembly. And so if no one has any further questions from the council today, and I don't see any, we're gonna adjourn this hearing. Thank you.